Nicky, may I start by thanking you for you and your team for the inspiring work that you've been doing over the years in the field of evangelism. But may I ask, where did it all start for you?
It started for me when I was 18, because I was an atheist. I was brought up, my father was a refugee, a secular Jew. My mother was not a churchgoer. And I encountered Jesus through reading the New Testament in my first year at Cambridge University. And I realized that what Jesus said, when Jesus said, "I came that you might have life and have it in all its fullness," that it was true. And I experienced life in all its fullness. It doesn't mean life is easy, but it's the fullest life that you can lead. And the greatest privilege is to know Jesus Christ, to have a relationship with Jesus. And I think the greatest act of love, therefore, is to introduce someone to Jesus. That's the kindest thing that you can do for anyone on the planet. And there's so many injustices in the world, racial injustices, poverty, disease, but the greatest injustice is never to have heard the good news about Jesus. From that moment onwards, I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing anything I could to pass on the good news. Jesus is alive. Jesus was raised from the dead. He is alive. You can know him. There is a purpose to life. There is life beyond the grave. This life is not the end. Forgiveness is possible. This is great news. People there, the world desperately needs hope. And we have the only message of lasting hope for all humankind.
Thank you. I love the theme of abundance, because what I hear you saying, we're not doing someone an injustice to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's all about presenting this gift of life and this gift of abundance. And I really love that. Nicky, over the years, you must have learned some lessons, on the issue of evangelism. What are some of the key lessons that you've learned?
I've learned that I'm not very good at it. I've learned that I can be very insensitive at times, and at other times I can be very fearful, and that I'm not very good at it. And I need to find a way in which people like me, who are not particularly good at it, can do it. And I tried everything. I tried knocking on doors. I tried questionnaires on the street. First question, what did you have for breakfast? Last question, would you like to ask Jesus into your life? And I found that it wasn't very productive. So I tried everything. And that's why I was excited to stumble on Alpha, because I found it was a way in which people like me, who are not natural evangelists, can communicate our faith in a non-pressured way, a non-pressured, non-confrontational, relaxed, natural way to communicate faith.
I really appreciate what you're saying about I'm not good at it. Yeah. Because I'll be honest to you, some of the most awkward, anxious moments that I had in my life was when people sort of forced me into an hardcore evangelistic outreach thing. I almost ran away for life,
Yeah. But it's not natural, and I don't think it's biblical either. I don't think it's, it's not human. Jesus was ultimately, not only was he the Son of God, God made flesh, but he was also fully human. And being fully human involves loving people, being kind to people, being natural, being ourselves, not forcing something down. So it's just some of the things that I tried early on were very unnatural. They didn't revolve around loving people for who they were, and it was sort of almost like you were treating people as less than human in our attempt to pass it on. So I think the motivation was right, but the method was not right.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I think we've touched on it now, but maybe some of the reasons why you think Alpha was effective over the years.
And I have been trying to work out why it works for the last 32 years. And I would say there are, well, there's so many things, but the first is because of the power of the gospel. The gospel is the power of God to salvation for everyone who has faith. And at the heart of Alpha it's the kerygma, as they would say in the Catholic Church. It's the good news. It's the message of Jesus Christ and him crucified. And that message is life-changing. So I would say that's the first reason. It's because Alpha is not the whole of the Christian faith. It's not Alpha to Omega. It's the first announcement of the good news, which changes people's lives. Second reason is the power of the Holy Spirit. So there's a weekend on the Holy Spirit. And the most important thing for anyone to know in this life is that they are loved. And how do we know that we're loved? We know that we're loved because the Son of God, St. Paul wrote, Galatians 2, verse 20, the Son of God loved me and gave himself for me. If you'd been the only person in the world, if I'd been the only person in the world, Jesus would have died for me. And that is the most powerful, it gives us an understanding that we are loved. But the Holy Spirit gives us an experience of God's love. It takes it from here to here. As St. Paul writes, Romans 5, verse 5, the love of God, that's God's love for us, is poured into our hearts by the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. And it's that experience of God's love that is life transforming. And I've looked at the questionnaires now for 98 courses, and I've noticed that not all, but probably the majority, the moment we ask them, were you a Christian when you started the course? No. Are you a Christian now? Yes. When and how did the change occur? On the Alpha weekend, when I experienced, and then they talk about whatever they experienced, but they experience God's love. That evangelism starts with God's action. It's the Holy Spirit. It's only God who can transform someone's life. We can't do it. And it's the Holy Spirit who changes people's lives. So the power of the gospel, the importance of the Holy Spirit. I would say two other less kind of spiritual things, but equally spiritual in some ways. So at number 3, I would say hospitality. Just the fact of welcoming people into a home, in this case, because we were running Alpha in our home, and many of the Alphas around the world run in homes. But the fact that you welcome people with food, Jesus did so much around meals. You have a meal together, you make friends with them. It's not, going back to our earlier conversation, it's not artificial at all. And then the fourth reason I would say is the way the small groups work. So the small groups, as I'm sure you know, it's not preaching at people. They in the video or the talk, they hear the gospel. Who is Jesus? Why did he die? How can I have faith? The Bible, prayer, all the basic things about the Christian faith. And it's based on this verse, and I think it's Proverbs 20, verse 5. In the heart of every human being is a deep well, and the wise person draws it out. And so the skill of a host is not to preach. Some of the best hosts are people who've just done the previous Alpha course because they don't know anything. And that's a huge advantage in hosting Alpha. It's just letting the conversation happen, asking questions, and recognizing that in the heart of everyone who comes, whether they're an atheist or a Muslim or a Hindu or an agnostic, in the heart of every human being is a deep well, and the wise person draws it out. Yes, we believe in the doctrine of the fall, but we also believe in the doctrine of creation. and that everyone is created in the image of God. There's something interesting about every human being. And of course, we also believe in the doctrine of redemption and glorification. But for this point, it's about the fact that everyone's created in the image of God, and therefore there's something interesting we can draw out and learn from everyone in the group. So it's listening to one another. And that's what makes the conversations so fascinating. So next Wednesday, we're doing the talk on the cross. And the first question that I'll ask, we're hosting the group, is, has anybody here ever had to forgive someone? That will be so interesting. I mean, who's gone through life without having to forgive someone, without being hurt in some way? And we'll hear fascinating things. Probably some of them, it's their parents they need to forgive. Some of them, it'll be an ex-husband or wife or child. But we'll hear, and we'll get to know those people. Second question, has anybody here ever needed to ask for forgiveness? Much harder. Not everyone will say something, but probably by the end, most people will have said something they felt guilty about. Third question, what do people feel about the idea of God forgiving? I mean, can you imagine the conversation that's going to take place next Wednesday in that room? You can imagine in that conversation, people begin to let down their guard. Once someone talks about what they've needed forgiveness for, they become very vulnerable. And we think we'll impress people by our strengths, but we connect with people through our vulnerabilities. So why does Alpha work? I would say because everybody on the planet, everyone in South Africa, everyone in Cape Town is looking for three things. They're looking for purpose. And ultimately, you only find purpose in life through a relationship with God through Jesus. Secondly, they're looking for love. And this is where they experience God's love through the cross, resurrection, and the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. And thirdly, they're looking to belong. And what happens in an Alpha small group is these connections take place. And by the end of the course, people say, I've only been here 10 weeks, but I feel closer to you than the friends I've had for 20 years, because they've experienced church, a microcosm of church, which is the greatest community on the planet.
Talking about the church, we live in a secular world, a post-Christendom. You must experience that in the UK as well.
Yeah.
What would you say are some of the main challenges facing the church today?
The big challenge is secularization. I think for young people, it changed, the culture changes all the time. That's why I always want to be in a small group, because the culture changes so fast that if I wasn't in a small group for 3 months, I do it 3 times a year. But if I wasn't, even in the breaks, the 4 weeks, I forget, and the culture changes. So take, for example, what are the great challenges facing our culture at the moment? I would say 8 years ago, every Alpha small group was influenced by the new atheists, by Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, Grayling, and someone in the group would come out with something from the God delusion. And it happened for about 2 or 3 years, every single small group. But for the last 6 years, never. No, not one person has ever raised those issues. What I think much more now, and this is, I swim every morning. It's somewhere between 2 degrees and 7 degrees in the Serpentine in London. And I swim every morning. And I swim with a group of people, mainly young people. And I'm a member of this group. And it's so interesting what they're into. They're not into atheism at all, none of them. They are into yoga, meditation, diet, all kinds of, some quite new age practices, but people are looking for spirituality, but without cost. So I think the big challenge I see amongst this next generation coming up is this looking for a spirituality without cost. And they don't want to pay a price. There's parts of their lifestyle which are actually very good and healthy and kind and generous, but also they're parts of their lifestyle which are not really in line with the Christian, what Jesus calls us to, because Jesus doesn't call us to spirituality without cost. He says, take up your cross, deny yourself, and follow me. And that's a much harder challenge for the generation that's coming up. So, and because of that, they see parts of the Bible as toxic, because they challenge some of the things that they think of are fine things to do. And they feel the idea of telling someone else is also toxic. Everyone can believe whatever they want. And this is how we've made a change in Alpha over the years. So, for example, we used to have so in a sense, you want to start with the things where people are kind of nodding to get people. So is there more to life? Everyone agrees there's more to life. Who is Jesus? Well, there's kind of respect for Jesus. Why did he die? There's, everyone, there's a sense of need there, forgiveness, faith. Yes, everyone has faith in something. Then you get on. It used to be the Bible was the next talk. And that was relatively easy to give because people had respect for this book that was kind of they knew about and etc. And then prayer. Prayer was much more difficult than the Bible because prayer was sort of sounded a bit boring. People had memories of school prayers and being dull. Now we switch those two around. Prayer is really easy. Everybody pray. I mean, these friends of mine, they meet before we swim to meditate. Like they're all into prayer. Eat, pray, love. It's like it's a part of spirituality today is to pray. But the Bible, that's like a big stumbling block because they regard some of it as toxic. Same at the end of the course. We used to do telling others because that was kind of like, it's harder, but this is week 8. And then healing was week 9. Healing, oh, that's weird. We had to wait a long time before we could get onto that. Now healing, oh yeah, everyone I swim with is into healing. They're all into all kinds of healing practices. There's no problem about having a week on healing at all. We could have that week 1, they'd love it. But telling others, that's like really hard work, trying to give that talk today, because there's like, what are you doing trying to impose your beliefs on someone else? That's just an example of how culture is changing. And we need to be constantly not change. The big mistake some parts of the church can make is to try and change the message, but leave the packaging the same. So the packaging puts off some of the younger generation. But what the biggest mistake we can make is to try and change the message. The message is unchanging. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Don't let's tamper with the message. Leave the message alone. It's fine. It's powerful. It's the power of God to salvation. But the packaging, how we present that message, has to change with each generation. We can't be doing it the same way as in the 17th century. You can't have the same music as the 17th century. You can't have, you've got to change. But not only not the same as the 17th century, it can't be the same as 2018, because the culture has changed. It can't even be the same as last year. All the time, we've got to be listening to the culture and the way in which we present the unchanging message of Jesus Christ and him crucified.
Oh, and again, it makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And I can relate to every word that you're saying. If you have one prayer for the church, what would that be?
Revival. Revival. I'm always thrilled when I hear reports from around the world that someone's beginning to experience revival. That's wonderful news. We need an outpouring of the Holy Spirit. Only God can, we're dependent on God. God is sovereign. He is the ruler and Lord and King of the universe. And we are utterly dependent on him and his Spirit. And we need to say, Lord, pour out your spirit again on the church in South Africa, and on the church in the whole of Africa. And we see signs of that. I think there's a shift. There's a reversal. Bishop Leslie Newbigin, do you know Leslie Newbigin? I'm sure you know Leslie Newbigin, who I absolutely love, who taught at our Bible school here in his 80s. Amazing, amazing man. But he prophesied really in the 1960s, various things were going to happen in the culture and in the church. And one of the things he prophesied was a reversal of East and West, so that the center of Christianity coming out of Europe, America, so it's politically, economically, and spiritually. If you think about what the shift is happening in our culture right now, from US, Europe to China and Asia, economically, politically, and spiritually. Some China experts are thinking that even now China may be the largest Christian country in the world, and maybe somewhere between 100 and 300 million Christians in China. And they're sending out missionaries all over the world now. But so there's a shift in the globe, and I think I long for what's happening in China and Africa and Latin America to happen in, it's happening in Africa, but to happen in South Africa as well, and in America and in Europe, particularly Europe. South Africa, you haven't slipped as far as we have in Europe. There's still, when you go to South Africa, there's still faith. A lot of people have been brought up with faith. There's still strong faith in a way that in Europe and and now increasingly in the US, it's slipping. But we all need a further outpouring of the Holy Spirit. We all need revival. And I think what's happening in South Africa is I'm not, who am I to comment on South Africa, but all I'd say is what's happening in London right now with HTB was something very beautiful, because it was very diverse. And I think there's something about the beauty of diversity. In heaven, before the throne, every tribe, every race, every language, worshiping Jesus. And Jesus taught us to pray, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Well, we know in heaven, everyone's going to be there. Diversity is not going to be eliminated, it's going to be celebrated. And I think the more we celebrate it here, the more we will see an outpouring of the Holy Spirit, unity across the denominations, across every different spectrum. Then I think we will see Paul's prayer in Ephesians 20. There's an amazing prayer. I'm sure you know this, where Paul talks about the manifold wisdom of God. And the word he uses for manifold is a hapax legomena. It appears once in the New Testament. Polypoikolos, but the word polypoikolos, manifold wisdom of God, only appears once in the New Testament, and it appears once in the Septuagint translation of the Hebrew Old Testament. And it's used to translate Jacob's coat of many colors. And it's like, that's the beauty, like you've got at your conference, you've got all these different parts of the church coming together. And that's the polypoikolos, the many colored, the Jacob's coat of many colors. And I think that's, our prayer for the church is that it'll be like the church in heaven, before the throne, worshiping Jesus, manifold wisdom of God revealed to the world.
Nicky, you speak right into my heart. I thank you so much. We're running out of time, but I need to ask you this next question. You'll soon be launching a 10-year Alpha Vision. Just a quick few words on that. You must be very excited about it.
Yeah, so the 17th of April, 2033, I'm sure that date is in your diary, Braam. 17th of April, 2033. For those of your listeners, or your watchers or listeners that may not be familiar, the 17th of April is Easter Day 2033. And 2033, of course, is 2000 years after the resurrection. So we're working together with others. The Bible translators are going to have the New Testament in the 99.996% of the languages in the world. We're working with lots of different organizations. Just come back from Rome, where we were working with 90 different Catholic organizations who have a 2033 vision. So our part is to make Alpha available to everyone on the planet by Easter Day 2033. Pray that God will enable as many people as possible to encounter Jesus. As I say, the greatest injustice, beyond all the other terrible injustices there are in the world, the greatest injustice is for someone never to have had the opportunity to hear about Jesus.
Oh, Nicky, this is incredible, and really, I want to thank you for this. You can be assured that we will be following this very closely. And for me, the excitement lies in the fact that we can all get together and rally behind you and create a movement, not only a program, but a movement towards 2033.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I want to end off and come back to the question that we've started, or the theme of the conference, rekindling the spirit of evangelism in our communities.
Yeah.
So just some final words on how do you think it is possible for a congregation to engage beyond the confines of the church?
Well, Braam, you're so right.
Yeah,
you're so right to ask that question, because Leslie Newbigin, one of the things that Leslie Newbigin said was that every church, every local church, however small and weak, ought to have a vision for the ends of the earth. So every church ought to have a vision beyond itself to the ends of the earth. And this is the key. So if you put anything other than evangelism first, you're not going to achieve it. So if you put renewal first, like, oh, we want to be renewed, we want an outpouring of the Holy Spirit, you just go on being renewed and renewed and renewed, and you become like the Dead Sea. You become very salty but dead. Because you've got water coming in but not water going out. So if you look at the Great Commission, so people always think about the Matthew Great Commission, go make disciples of all nations. But there's another Great Commission, the Lucan one. You will receive power when you through the Holy Spirit, and you will be my witnesses. So the renewal of the Holy Spirit, the power of the Holy Spirit, is in order that we should be his witnesses. Water coming in, water going out. So if you make evangelism your number one priority, you have to be filled with the Spirit. Otherwise, you can't do it. If you make unity your number one priority, you will spend all your time discussing the things you disagree about, and you'll end up more disunified. And we've had plenty of experience of that recently in the church. But if you make evangelism your priority, you have to be unified, because Jesus prayed that we should be one in order that the world will believe. When you're evangelizing, you can't be fighting each other because no one's going to be interested. So if you make evangelism your priority, unity follows, discipleship follows. Because if you just, I want to be discipled, I want to go deeper. Yeah, but you can fill your attic with notes on Leviticus and but actually, if you go out, John Wimber used to say the meat is on the street. It's when you go out and pray for people to be healed. It's when you try to lead when you host an alpha group, you're going to be asked questions and you're going to grow in your knowledge, but you're also going to grow in your life, because you know that they're not going to be interested unless you're sowing the fruit of the Spirit, unless you're loving, joyful, peaceful, kind, generous, self-control. They're not going to be interested. So you have to grow in discipleship if you're going to evangelize. So everything follows from putting evangelism first. And it's how we're meant to live. We're meant to be concerned, not about, if we're always looking inwards, what is the definition of sin? Martin Luther, Homo in se incurvatus est. It's a person, it's human beings curved in on themselves. And it's when we can be tempted to that in the church. We're looking inwards to ourselves or to the church. Oh, we've really got to focus now on rebuilding our local church. We haven't got, we can't give to anyone outside because we've got needs ourselves. We can't go out because we got to look at and a nation can become the same. Let's make our nation great again. No, the more you do that, the more the nation becomes less. The more the church looks in on itself, the more the church becomes less. The more an individual looks in on themselves, the less they become. The more we go out to others, the greater we become. The more a church goes out to the world, the greater it becomes. The more a nation goes out to the world, the greater it becomes. It's the opposite of sin, is looking outwards, looking out to others, not thinking about ourselves so much as thinking about the world. So evangelism is key to everything in life. It's key. It's right at the heart of love, is looking out for others.
And Nicky, thank you so much. What we'll do shortly in this conference now is to go into discussion groups to discuss what you've said and what some of the first speakers have said. So we really want to engage people as much as possible. And I firmly believe that we've got so much on the table now to have an incredible discussion. I want to end off with the last question. Anything on your heart, just a special message or a word or something that came to you during the past week, or something that you've seen or you just want to share with us as a final word?
We love the church. I love every part of the church, and it's a great honor to be with. I know it's not just the Dutch Reformed Church, but for someone from the Dutch Reformed Church, and to be with all the other parts of the church, and also to be in South Africa, which is a nation we love dearly. Many, many friends there. We've had wonderful conferences there, and God bless South Africa. God bless the church, and God bless your conference. And I pray that God will pour out his Spirit on you as you gather, that you'll experience more of God's love, you'll encourage one another, and that we will see a great outpouring of the Spirit in South Africa, which will affect not just South Africa, but the whole of Africa and beyond.
Nicky, thank you. And now it's time for me to bless you and say, may God bless Alpha, may God bless the 10-year vision. May God bless this incredible movement, the work that you are doing, and let's journey together.
Yeah.